All right. Yes. Well, thank you for coming out. My name is Councilor Joe Driscoll. I represent the 5th District. With us is Council President Helen Hudson, Majority Leader Councilor Steve Thompson, and Councilor at Large Michael Green. We call this meeting today to discuss the future of 81 and which alternative we will go with as the City of Syracuse. The council, for those of you who are unaware, wrote a resolution in 2015 supporting the community grid option. Discussion was that we've had such a large turnover in the council that the conversation should be sparked again, that the new councilors were interested in making a statement, a resolution of a similar kind, or investigating the different options that are available. So that's why we've called this meeting today. I would say when this meeting was announced, the overwhelming feedback was, haven't we had this discussion enough? I've heard about this on and on to death, and my response would be, no, we haven't. This is the most important decision to affect this region for probably 50 to 100 years, and I think it's worth a couple more discussions. So I also think there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So that is the reason this was called the fact-finding mission today. Was I wanted to give both sides the opportunity to present facts regarding this matter. So we've reached out to people who are for the community grid and those who are with the Save 81 and offered them the opportunity to present. So the way this will operate, the program will be divided into two sections. We've invited, as I said, Rethink 81 and Save 81 to present different data. Those people will be allowed 5 to 8 minutes to present. Hopefully that will take up 30 to 40 minutes. That will be followed by another 30 to 40 minutes of allowing public input for people who have signed up with the yellow cards. If you'd like to speak, those people will be granted 2 minutes to state an opinion for the last 40 minutes. So first 30, 40 minutes will be the facts, the data, the studies, and the second half will be hearing from the public and listening to your comments. And again, we're going to try to focus on listening as the council. That's our goal, but as this is a fact-finding mission, if misinformation is presented, we will respond to that and clarify the facts of the issue as we understand them. And hopefully we'll have a good discussion and come to some kind of consensus for this region on what the best destiny is for us as Syracuse and Onondaga County. So first, Greg Lowe, Sharon Owens. Our first presenter will be Sharon Owens, the Deputy Mayor of Syracuse, presenting.
Well, shouldn't they be there if they're going to present off the slide?
What's that?
If they're going to present off the slide, they should be over here, right?
Oh, should you come to the...
Yeah, the two of you, Greg and Sharon.
Greg and Sharon, come up so you're close to the mic so you can look at the slides, I guess.
You might want to grab that microphone for you, since there's no one there.
So for those of you unfamiliar, joining us is Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens and Greg Lowe, both work with the administration.
So, can you hear me? I'm usually out there and I'm always saying, pull the mic up.
Jim, can we crank up the main volume a little bit so people can hear?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Driscoll, Council President Hudson, Councilors Thompson and Green. So we're pleased to have this opportunity to present perspectives on behalf of the administration. And we have two important points that we'd like to guide our thoughts today. First, the 81 viaduct is not just a city issue, it is a regional issue. The 81 viaduct is not only the middle of our city, it is the center of Onondaga County and the core of central New York, and it stands in the very heart of New York State. The viaduct impacts neighborhoods and defines the landscape of an important part of our city. People from the city and from across the region use the viaduct every single day. Any solution will cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It will be funded by people who live in the city, the county, the state, and even our nation. 81 viaduct affects us all. We need to reject the temptation to claim that this is a city issue, or worse yet, a city versus suburbs issue. We're all in this together. Second, we're recognizing the broad regional impact of the decision ahead. Our administration wants to see a solution that meets a higher standard and an approach that benefits the entire region, not just the city or just the surrounding area. A solution that addresses long-term problems and solutions in the city and other communities affected by Interstate 81. No solution gives all parties everything they want, as no solution does. Compromise will be required. The city understands that we are ready for those conversations. A higher standard solution does exist if we can give up the win-lose construct that has dominated too much of this discussion and other discussions we've had in this community. Mayor Walsh offers this view at his State of the City address earlier this year. His words were on the screen right now. He challenged us to go beyond thinking only about moving cars and focus on moving our community forward. And he said, instead of pitting communities against each other, what if we stood together, unified with a plan that creates wins for all of our community? I believe the decision before us can and should be a source of a deeper collaboration and a way to reconnect the economic interests of our city and our suburbs. Those of you that were there at the State of the City or saw it on television heard those words. Before doing that, let's start with where we are right now. As you know, the State Department of Transportation is engaged in a comprehensive review, an environmental impact statement of 3 potential approaches: a new wire viaduct, a tunnel, and a community grid. It is essential to note a critical fact that the DOT has verified that all 3 solutions can work. All 3 move traffic safely and effectively through the area. Despite claims otherwise, none create a risk of gridlock. In the interest of an honest community discussion, those claims should be stopped once and for all. It is also important to acknowledge the importance of the comprehensive DOT review currently underway to arriving to a solution. Community agreement on an approach is desired and possible, but a comprehensive EIS is required by law. Its findings can be used to guide us to the solution that is best for all of us, based on research, data, and science, not myths or fear. The administration's position, and we expect a comprehensive EIS to come to a similar conclusion, is that the community grid approach is the higher standard solution we referenced earlier. Why? It eliminates the hulking viaduct that has stood in the center of our city. It improves quality of life for people living near the viaduct and corrects a decades-old wrong that had been done to city neighborhoods. It addresses the traffic choke points that infuriate drivers today by better using the existing Interstate 481, and instead of concentrating downtown-bound vehicles in a single area, it redistributes cars along multiple streets and in neighborhood business corridors that are yearning for commerce and activity. The community grid protects the greatest number of buildings along the route of the highway, freeing up more land for productive use. The interest in downtown real estate is growing, and we've seen $1 billion in investment into downtown in the past 10 years. Tearing down more than 24 properties for uses that generate no additional activity or revenue is short-sighted. And the community grid is the most efficient construction option, cost-efficient construction option, which creates the opportunity to use finite public works funding more creatively to address issues and to fuel growth in areas beyond the 1-mile stretch of the viaduct. This is what other forward-thinking cities have done, cities which are now thriving. See what is happening in Milwaukee, San Francisco, and Seoul, Korea. Not gridlock, just growth. Even Rochester, our closest neighbor, is removing its inner loop to improve quality of life and create new development. Now my colleague Greg Lowe, Director of City Initiatives, is going to share more about the 3 major opportunities that are created by the community grid. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to announce also joining us is Councilor Rudd, Councilor at Large. But yes, Mr. Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sharon, and to all who are here tonight. Let's look at the first opportunity, opportunity one, which is our ability to unlock the economic potential of the land currently in the shadow of the viaduct for city and for regional benefit. Now, for those who in the room can see on the screen, I'm going to start to show you some pictures. And for those who are watching on television tonight and can't see, this is Clinton Square with the fountains going. This is the Taste of Syracuse Festival. Here's Hotel Syracuse. These pictures that we're showing are scenes that no matter where you live in the city or in central New York, you recognize these sites. They're some of the incredible places in our downtown that not only make our city stronger, but they attract people to the city from throughout the county, the state, and even the nation. This is the Landmark Theater up right now. They generate thousands of jobs and untold millions of dollars. Here's the Everson Museum Plaza. In economic activity and tax revenue, this is the Farmers Market. This is showing a picture of the War Memorial, Non-Center Complex, and a crunch game going on, and Hanover Square, and now take a look at the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Yet somehow, maybe because for many of us, it's just been there for a long time. Over about 10 city blocks, 11 city blocks, we've gotten used to accepting this picture. This is a chain link fence near a parking lot underneath one of the overpasses. And it is representative of what you see today if you walk in the area of the overpass. More pictures. Closest thing to a park out there is a bench with trees that this picture wasn't taken in the fall. Those trees look like that in June because they can't find light. The closest thing to structures is a utility building in between two of the areas of the viaduct. More fences, more parking. These pictures represent what may be the most compelling regional case for the community grid. Missed opportunity and wasted potential. I think you're looking at, by the way, this is people living in the shadow of the viaduct, basketball just on the edge of it, riding your bike right with the viaduct over your head, a small child. You know, this is the stuff that Governor Cuomo was referring to when he called the 81 viaduct a classic planning blunder. It's time to unlock the revenue-generating potential of the land in the shadow of the viaduct and use it to create revenue and jobs that will benefit not just the city, but the entire region. The viaduct today is overshadowing assets that can generate hundreds of millions of dollars of economic activity in our region. We can see new mixed income housing developments. More scenes like the ones we looked at earlier of a vibrant downtown with construction like this new build in recent time in downtown Syracuse. And development and growth, again, that can yield tens of millions of dollars annually in city and county tax revenue. Now, we've done this before, right here in Syracuse. It's the story of Franklin Square, the Lakefront District, Inner Harbor, even Destiny, USA. These were industrial wastelands, relics of an old economy. We took down oil tanks, cleaned up brownfields, steel and concrete was removed, creating jobs, and clearly economic opportunity resulted. That's the opportunity of the community grid. As the city today faces financial uncertainty, and towns and villages throughout the county raise legitimate concerns about their own tenuous state of finances, a large swath of fertile ground sits there waiting to be turned over, and rebuilding the viaduct will merely cover it up. Constructing a tunnel squanders too much of the development opportunity because of the large amount of space that is required for the exits and the entrances, and because of the limitations of building close to the tunnel. Only the community grid meets the higher standard, with land transferred to a local development commission to oversee its productive reuse, generating transformative economic opportunity. Again, not just for the city, but with a cooperative approach benefits to communities throughout the county. I want to look quickly now at the second and third opportunities. Opportunity 2, we can create regional transformative growth. There are some communities, inner ring suburbs in the path of Interstate 81, like the town of Salina, that understandably are concerned about the effect of the loss of traffic that might occur on the interstate. There's another matter there that is a matter that we should not ignore. But change should also not be viewed only as a risk of loss. There's a significant potential of gain. First, it's possible to create an 81 business district designation on the current 81 corridor. So such a classification, which would be signified by a green 81 medallion, would help ensure that traffic interested in the business districts along the route would not be redirected. That would lessen the traffic impact of designation of 481 around the city as 81. Second, there's potential to direct significant resources to investing in the inner ring suburbs on the 81 corridor, such as Salina. We can and should seek the creation of an investment fund that would provide economic development assistance to those communities concerned about a drop in visitors. We can create new and better ways to increase visibility and visits. We can identify major demand drivers, exciting attractions, and related transportation solutions to bring new commerce and visitation to those areas. And we can also provide urban design assistance and implementation funds to enhance the appearance and attractiveness of communities along Interstate 81. It's exactly what Mayor Walsh meant also in his State of the City when he said, showing on the screen now, we should not feel the need to argue over how the current pie is carved up. The city is prepared to work together to make a bigger pie for all. Together we can do transformative things for the city while simultaneously investing in and strengthening the economies of our suburban communities and improving our region's overall quality of life. Opportunity 3, we can address regional transportation needs. Regional. While the 81 viaduct may have an oversized impact on the heart of the city of Syracuse, we all recognize it plays a vital role in regional transportation. Changing it creates an opportunity to address transportation problems that have existed in this region for decades. In DeWitt, there have been concerns about increased traffic along Interstate 481 if 481 is designated as Interstate 81. We should take those concerns seriously and use a community approach to address them. An additional lane of traffic could be added to 481 in both directions when it becomes 81. Intersections of concern like 3E exit in DeWitt could be redesigned to improve traffic flow and safely accommodate pedestrians and cyclists. And noise impacts, which have been overlooked for far too long in that area and other parts of 81 and 481, can be addressed with sound attenuation, even those with positive environmental impacts such as solar panels and vegetation to filter the air. From the western suburbs, truck traffic on local roads is a major concern for sure, heightened by the possibility that more trucks might choose to leave the interstate without a viaduct. As a city that's seeking to create more walkable and livable spaces, we understand that concern completely. And we share a concern about the way truck traffic might impact city roads. So we can work together with towns affected by truck traffic to reduce those impacts. A key solution is transferring ownership of certain state roads to the county or to the locality so that the local community has the ability to regulate truck traffic. This would be an effective solution in places like Route 20 in Skaneateles and Route 11 through the city of Syracuse. We can also better manage truck traffic in the area locally by developing a comprehensive rail and freight plan for the region. So concluding on these 3 opportunities, it's worth noting that just today Mayor Walsh is back in the office from returning to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the annual meeting, where dialogue around transportation was a big issue, and it focused on the impact of autonomous vehicles on cities and the economy. And as the mayor has said before, if we want to compete in the 21st century economy, now is not the time to double down on a 20th century infrastructure.
Councilors, just quickly as we close, I just want to close by saying my community, and my community is Syracuse, Onondaga County, and Central New York. I'm a resident of all three. And history has shown to me that every time we have to make a difficult, impactful, long-term impactful meeting, we start fighting, and we start arguing, and we start getting sides, one side or the other, and we start battling each other instead of figuring out how we can help all of us. I'm asking my community, on behalf of the administration, and my community again is Syracuse, Onondaga County, and Central New York. Can we not pit one another again on this topic that is going to have such a huge impact as we move forward to generations when we all are long gone? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Deputy Mayor and Greg. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, our next presenter, Barry. Would you like to go, Joe Bright, would you like to go next? Sure. Yeah. All right, representing Save 81, Joe Bright would like to present. How are we gonna? Should we move that easel over to the microphone there, so that everyone can hear you, Joe? Is that all right? Yeah. You got it. Everyone, help him over there. Make sure he doesn't clip anyone on the table. No, you're all right. No one needs to see us. They've had enough.
I'll probably put you on the camera, so it's turn it to the people. Yeah.
And maybe if you want to turn the mic around so you can look at the people, that'd probably be good, so the camera can see you too.
This thing goes up. Okay.
Oh, he's filmed from the other way. They have cameras both ways, right?
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Bright. I'm with Duncan Bright Furniture. We've been on the south side of Syracuse for over 90 years and have 79 employees. Personally, I'm a resident of downtown Syracuse. I actually live across the street. Duncan Bright is a proud member of Save 81, and Save 81 is an organization of citizens, community leaders, and emergency service providers. Would you like me to hold those? Okay. Dedicated to maintaining high-speed access through the city of Syracuse. As part of our affiliation with Save 81, the Common Council has invited us to speak tonight, and for that, we're very grateful. We know the benefits of high-speed access through the city of Syracuse. It's what we have today. We can get to any part of Syracuse within 15 minutes, and the traffic in our downtown streets is tolerable. Today, I want to speak to you from the perspective of a Southside business about the impact that a community grid would have on Southside businesses and residents. And after that, I'll expand the scope and talk about why we feel it's important to maintain high-speed access through the city more generally. A grid proposal would take traffic coming northbound on 81 and route it through city streets starting at exit 17. That's Salina and Brighton. Traffic would then enter a street-level boulevard until it resumes its connection with 81 north of downtown. Residents of northern neighborhoods in Syracuse would need to either A, travel through city streets, or B, traverse 81 to the east and then come back north to visit the south side. We polled our customers via a survey and asked them, would you continue to shop at Duncan Bright if a community grid were implemented? 16% of our customers said no. In fact, they would not continue to shop at Duncan Bright if a grid option were implemented. This would be a disaster for Duncan Bright, but I use it as an example of what would happen more generally to any South Side business. We can be confident that a certain percentage of residents of Syracuse will no longer come to visit South Side businesses. That's an unfortunate reality for a neighborhood that has historically struggled to maintain healthy businesses. On top of that, the community grid proposal puts forth a grid that on its southernmost point ends at Martin Luther King Boulevard. That intersection is north of the South Side, and it is not within walking distance. So the South Side loses on all levels with a grid proposal. One, we lose the connectivity that a major viaduct such as 81 provides in getting to other parts of the city, and then encouraging residents in the city of Syracuse to visit Southside businesses. And then two, Southside residents and businesses receive none of the purported walkability benefits that a grid would provide, or could provide, is stated to provide. That's because a grid is, the southernmost point of it is not within walking distance of Syracuse's south side. Let's expand the scope to the city of Syracuse, and we have 3 strong reasons why we believe it's important to maintain high-speed access through the city. First is traffic. 80,000 vehicles a day traverse that stretch of 81 that a grid proposal would seek to eliminate. This graphic over my right shoulder, each dot, if you can't see it very well, you should be able to see the dots. Each dot represents an intersection that would have a degraded level of service under a grid proposal. That's 99 intersections that would have a degraded level of service, and 35 of them will be degraded to a D, E, or F level, which stands for congested, severely congested, or failure, respectively. On top of that, 16 additional traffic signals would need to be installed for a grid proposal. So we can be confident that we will have longer commutes, more time stuck in traffic, and more minutes at red lights under a grid proposal. Second, we feel it's important to move forward with maintaining high-speed access to the city for our environment. A community grid proposal would result in 500% higher levels of emissions of volatile organic compounds than a rebuild or repair the viaduct option. This is due to the stop-and-go nature of traversing city streets, or the additional miles required to drive along 481. As a society and community, we've never been more aware of our impact on the environment, and it seems like a step backwards to choose an option that is, has more pollution in the city of Syracuse. Third, and what I believe is most important for our elected officials, is that the city of Syracuse residents have shown that they prefer high-speed access through the city. 12 public opinion polls and surveys have been taken since late 2013, and in all 12, a repair or rebuild the viaduct solution was the most popular option. 17% to 39% of respondents said that they would prefer a community grid solution, but that was never in any of the 12 polls the more popular option than a repair or rebuild the viaduct. So to summarize, we feel that there are 3 strong reasons as to why maintaining high-speed access through the city is important. First is traffic. We know that there will be more traffic under a community grid. Second is pollution. We can reduce the level of emissions by electing to repair or rebuild 81. And third is the general opinion of the city of Syracuse residents preferring to maintain high-speed access through the city. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the Common Council for inviting us to speak.
Joe, can you send us those polls or source that? Or? Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
All right, Joe Bright, thank you for presenting. Barry Lentz, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure, thank you. I must begin by thanking the counselors for convening this opportunity for the public to come together and discuss this issue. Councilor Driscoll mentioned at the beginning that there are those who say that, geez, haven't we had enough of these? And I can't do better than argue or echo as strongly as I possibly can Councilor Driscoll's assertion that no, we haven't had enough. The problem is that the forums that we have been by and large forums in which people have been shouting each other in defense of one alternative or another, and in many cases with claims that are only loosely tenured to fact. It would be very tempting for me to launch into a refutation of some of the facts that we just heard. I'm not going to do that today. Hopefully there are going to be opportunities in the future to do that in a more focused way, because we really need more opportunities to come together like this in a context in which we can really honestly look at the facts and have facts-based discussions about what the best direction for us to go is. And so it is to that point that I really want to address the council and the administration today in terms of what those of us that are presenting today are asking the Common Council and the administration to do. And the material that I gave you, you'll find the items in there in more detail on pages 2 and 7 with a number of supporting documents. Unfortunately, I can't possibly copy that for everybody in the audience, though I certainly would like to. But the thing I'd like to begin with is emphasizing, from the beginning of this process, there has been all this talk about how we have to come up with a compromise. I think a compromise would be a fantastic idea, but what exactly does that mean? And how do we go about doing that in a region that stretches from Canada to Pennsylvania? And how many miles east and west? We have a political process, we have a body politic that is not constructed to allow us to come to a consensus. But if we are to come to a consensus, the only way that it can happen is through some kind of an honest, fact-based discussion of the matters at hand in determining what build alternative meets the greatest common good. To that end, I want to read a quote for the audience and for the councilors, which you have in writing, that came from Commissioner Joan McDonald back in October 14th, 2014. At the time, the county and the state had scheduled a series of lectures that many of us attended to look at different projects around the country and see what their applicability is to Syracuse. And in the context of those discussions, one of the presentations was about a project in New York City known as the Gowanus Project, in which they were unable to come to a solution. And as a result, they have just added, continued to patch up their viaduct ad infinitum. It's still happening today. They have a situation that is just like 81, with nets below the highway catching falling concrete, and so forth. So the idea of what is called a Gowanus impasse has been held over the heads of folks with the idea that we have to come to a compromise or we're going to have nothing. That compromise idea has been used in somewhat dishonest rhetoric to promote the idea of a tunnel with an alleged community grid above it. Now, whether that's a compromise or not is a matter that really we need to discuss. But the issue that I really want to bring before the Common Council and the group is what Commissioner McDonald said. While community consensus on which alternative build is desirable, it is important that the ultimate selection be based on a thorough and sound technical analysis. This analysis consists of the social, economic, and environmental assessment of each alternative that will be conducted in the next phase of the project. And that analysis is known as an environmental impact statement. Now, one of the things that those of us that are community grid supporters and Save I-81 actually are in agreement on is that we have reason to believe that DOT does not intend to do the kind of sound, in-depth economic analysis, not just of Syracuse, but of all impacted communities. And so it is imperative that that happens, and that really is the thrust of my comments to the Common Council and administration today. So I have 3 points that I'd like to make in terms of calling on the Common Council and the administration to act on. And of those 3 points, then I want to talk a little bit about the EIS and 4 specific points with respect to that. So the first point in terms of action for the Common Council is that the Common Council, I believe, needs to pass a new resolution. as Commissioner Driscoll alluded to in the beginning. The Common Council passed a resolution in January of 2015. At that time, we thought an EIS was imminent, would be coming out in a matter of maybe 6 months, at the most a year. Well, we're still waiting for an EIS. That hasn't happened yet. A lot has happened since 2015. So it certainly would be appropriate for the Common Council to take up passing a new resolution. The important thing, though, in thinking about that, though, is the last resolution called upon the governor to direct the DOT to develop and advance a build alternative known as what is now known as the community grid. The problem with that is it's actually illegal. The governor can't do that. DOT can't make a decision about a build alternative or can't favor one alternative over the other until the EIS comes out. So in crafting a new resolution, we're asking the Common Council to really focus on what are the criteria that are essential to be included in a fully developed, robust, deep analysis that eventuates in the environmental impact statement. One that treats all communities as important and does the economic analysis, the social analysis, and so forth that's necessary for each community. The second point, in partnership with the administration, hopefully the Common Council should convene a select task force, and Greg Lowe actually referred to this as one of the things that the administration is thinking of doing, to really look at all the critical issues that need to be addressed, not just in the EIS, but as we move forward in dealing with issues like, in particular and especially, land use. What's going to happen with the disposition of the land? Will that land be returned to the community, or is something else being planned for land? That's an issue that needs to be dealt with now and should be part of the whole EIS process. You know, it's actually fallacious to argue for a build alternative based on economic development if you don't have a plan for making that economic development happen, because history suggests that unless you have a plan, it's not going to happen, or at best it's willy-nilly come as may come. The third point is what we're doing tonight. I believe it is critical for the Common Council and for the administration to work together to have more opportunities like this where public can come together and really engage in fact-based discussion moderated by an authoritative voice rather than partisan sides shouting at each other about a build alternative. You know, as a supporter of the community grid, I'm frequently asked, if the money fell out of the sky to build a tunnel, would you support a tunnel? My answer is, I don't know, maybe. If you can show me a tunnel design that meets all of the needs of the residents in the area that are impacted by that process, then it's possible that I could support that. But I can't possibly answer that question without an EIS. So I personally can honestly say I will support any build alternative that an EIS shows meets the common good and addresses all the relevant environmental, social, and economic issues. So with respect to the EIS, there's 4 points that I want to make. Get to the right page. Okay, so first, and this is interesting, you know, both Deputy Mayor and Greg Lowe spoke about the fact that this is a regional project. Absolutely, it's a regional project, and everybody in the region has an interest in that. Well, the problem with that, though, and we've been in conversations with DOT from the beginning, while the needs and interests should be addressed of everybody that's impacted, it is wildly illogical to suggest that the needs and interests of somebody living in Watertown or Oswego or Auburn or Lafayette or somebody driving from Canada to Tennessee on I-81 are the same as the needs and interests of somebody living in Syracuse next to the viaduct. And that speaks to the question of how DOT is going to evaluate the different criteria and whether or not there will be weight applied to the differential interests of communities based on where they are and what their relationship is to the viaduct. Now, that doesn't offer any conclusions about who counts for what, but the idea that everybody counts equally is just wildly illogical, and I think it's something that the administration and the Common Council needs to address with DOT before the EIS process. and it's something to be taken into consideration. The second issue, and we've been talking about this, both the Deputy Mayor and Greg Lowe mentioned, the issue of land and the potential disposition of property in the current footprint of I-81 and adjacent tracts. Heretofore, all the design work that DOT has shown has portrayed that area as green space without any development. And history suggests that DOT prefers to keep the land. So whether DOT keeps the land or turns it into the green space or whatever happens to that is something, again, that the administration needs to immediately, and the Common Council needs to be immediately in dialogue with DOT and state about. The third item is with respect, again, coming back to the DIS. The DIS must include a robust analysis of ecological, aesthetic, historical, cultural, economic, social, and health impacts for every community that is impacted by each alternative. The concerns of bright furniture are absolutely important. And of the various businesses that have made an argument about how they might be impacted negatively by I-81 turning into a community grid and reordered on 481, they seem to be one of the businesses that has the most likely cause for concerns. But as representative administrations indicated in the beginning, there are ways of addressing those concerns and using mitigation funds to move forward in a way that meets everybody's needs. So the fourth and final point, with respect to a no-build alternative, this is a Gowanus impasse. There are those who would prefer a no-build alternative, where the bridges that exist are on a piecemeal basis repaired as they fail ad infinitum. A no-build alternative would be a moral and a logical disaster, both financially in terms of the ongoing disruption that would occur as each bridge fails and needs to be repaired, and also just a tremendous missed opportunity. So I think it's important moving forward for the council and administration to be aware of the fact that that still is out there, even though DOT has steadfastly denied that there would be no build. It still could be a possibility that must be addressed. So that concludes my comments. I'm going to be followed by three other community grid advocates. Diana Ryan is going to speak to some of the traffic data and other myths that have been floating around. Bob Haley is going to speak to some urban design principles, and Yusuf Abdul Qadar is going to speak to some of the social justice impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry. Barry Lenz. All right, we're running a little over time. I'm going to have to set my timer, and when you hear the bell go off, we're going to have to start wrapping up, if that's okay. No. Moving forward. What's that? Would you want them not sitting at the table?
That's fine, but then you have the cards? You're not doing the cards yet?
Yeah, not yet. A couple more presenters. Sorry, I didn't think the administration was going to run that long. All right, sorry, go ahead, Diana.
Okay, counselors, audience.
You get closer to the mic, Nate.
Sure.
It's a little
so
tempting.
I am going to speak to some of the things that the gentleman from Duncan Bright spoke about. For one thing, he is directly quoting a study by Spectra. Spectra was employed by the Save 81 businesses, so the purpose and the results of his study were already desired to go in a certain direction. But one of the points that was stated is absolutely egregiously taken from studies that were done in 95 and 96. So the 500% emissions that will increase under stop and start traffic, I read the report. Those studies were done in 95 and 96. In the late 80s and early 90s, I was a grad student at ESF. Part of my studies was to take air pollution courses. During the course of taking those courses, it was constantly referred to the carbon monoxide detector under Route 81 at Adams Street. It was frequently out of compliance. I just recently learned that in the late 90s, that carbon monoxide detector or monitor was removed. And the reason that it was removed was that it was constantly in compliance. So what happened from the early 90s to the late 90s? Air pollution regulations were changed. So vehicle emissions had to be addressed. There were emission controls put on vehicles, and one of those controls was a catalytic converter, which took care of carbon monoxide. Now, I'm not going to try to say that that indicates all pollutants and that all pollutants were decreased, but this study was done in 95 and 96, which is over 20 years ago. Cars have changed tremendously, and right now we're having an influx of electrical vehicles and hybrids, which under start and stop conditions have zero or minimal emissions and practically no noise. Believe me, I drive two of them. I drive a hybrid and I drive an electrical vehicle, and people do not hear me approaching. So that study is absolutely egregiously using material information from over 20 years ago, which is just ridiculous. At the best, it's irresponsible. At the worst, it is trying to misinform. So another thing that I'm going to speak to about the gentleman from Duncan Bright, he is directly referencing this report, and as far as I'm concerned, that is so egregiously wrong that anything else in that report is suspect. The other thing that he is referencing is the DOT level of service at intersections. I would say go to I-81 opportunities. It is very clearly stated how that changes the level of service. The level of service is excellent, so if it degrades slightly, it is not a big deal. And so they are just being honest about that the level of service will degrade, but how much it degrades is relative. And that report was totally taken out of context, and it is very misleading the way it was given. So I would go to I-81 Opportunities, the website, and look at what is presented by New York State DOT. It's much more clear, and it is not misleading. Another thing that was misleading in the report by Spectra is that 60% of traffic will be diverted onto 481. That is incorrect. Only 12% of the traffic on I-81 is through traffic. It will be diverted, and if you would like to refer to this, I'm going to actually go to the back of this. I was going to go through this step by step, but since we have limited time, I'm going to go to the myths and realities section. So if you will open up to the myths and realities section, I'm going to go down that one by one. So in referring to the first one, the myth is that more jobs will be created for the local service with the tunnel or viaduct. The tunnel and the viaduct both require specialized workers. So the majority of the workforce is going to be imported and will not come from the local workforce. Item number 2, the proponents for north-south I-81 through the city tried to tell you that, oh, you're going to get 10 minutes longer by taking 481 and 12 miles out of your way. That is just not true. Use Google Maps, and you will see that it's a 3-minute difference and a 3.4 mile difference. So on a long trip or even a short trip from, say, Watertown to Binghamton, 3 minutes is not a big deal. This is through traffic, approximately 11,000 cars. It's 12% of 91,000. The third item, during the tunnel excavation, many city water pipes will be replaced. So I have to state that my husband is a professional engineer who worked at the water department from 1993 to 2010. At the end of that time period, he was the commissioner of the water department. So any reference I make to water pipes come directly from him. He gives me his professional opinion. So a tunnel, just because it's dug deeper, does not mean that more water pipes are going to be replaced. Basically, you take and you chop your water pipe here and you chop your water pipe here. You put a replacement pipe in between with couplings on either end. It's a very minimal part of your water pipe. If you want to replace water pipes, the community grid excavates many intersections and many streets to improve them and enhance them. And during that construction, if you do it correctly, you can replace a lot of water pipes. There are approximately 500 miles of water pipes in the city of Syracuse. That's still not going to cover a lot of them, but it's going to cover a lot more than a tunnel excavation will. I do want to reference too the point that tunnel excavation, if you ask anybody who was near one, you are going to know that it's happening. So do not listen to any of your representatives who say, oh, you won't even know that the tunnel is being excavated. You will know it. And During the excavation, there's the danger of hitting gas pockets. They don't refer to that either. So tunnel excavation would be a big deal. It's also going to take 8 to 10 years, and you know how that happens. It always takes longer, and that's disruption of the economy and travel during all that time. Okay, the cost is covered by federal money. This is not true. Part of the cost of any of these replacements is going to be coming from the state funds. One of my tables estimated that as 85%, 15% split, because part of it is 90% 10 and part of it's 80% 20, so I did an estimate. I'm going to have to try to wrap up here.
Yes, please.
So I'm going to skip down to 2 items. One of them is the cost of the tunnel, which everybody says is not a big deal. It mostly is federal dollars. If you take the minimum cost for a tunnel and you take and look at what the community grid costs, and then, of course, this is what I got from my husband too, is an approximate cost for the replacement of the water pipes in Syracuse, you come up to less than what the least costing tunnel costs. And that's a much better use of funds for this city. It would take care of something that's a burden on the city every year with water pipe breaks. The last item is the summary of the analyzed travel times. This comes directly from New York State DOT information as well. They did a thorough examination. Granted, they had to use simulators. Their simulators are very sophisticated. They could put in accident delays and traffic delays, which they did, and they averaged it over 100 times. And this is what I summarized for what we have now, which is the no-build option, and what we would get with the community grid. I only looked at 2020. I didn't bother looking at 2050 because by then we're going to have a lot of changes in cars. But under that, 90% of these routes have 3 minutes or less in the difference of the routes. 32% are unchanged. So 32% of the routes that we travel in and around Syracuse are unchanged as far as time. 37% is less travel time. So you can go to New York State DOT tables and look at this yourself. 31% are the ones that get more travel time. Less than a third of the routes analyzed by New York State DOT have more travel time. The other ones are unchanged or have less travel time. And I also analyzed the routes for the hospitals. Real quick, sorry to take more time, but everybody is worried about times for responding to accidents and emergencies. So in the university area, 3 routes remain the same, 14 have less travel time, and 1 has more travel time. That's in the university area, which also employs a lot of people, so that will show you what the commute time would look like. Only 1 of the 18 routes that were analyzed has more travel time. The others are the same, and 14 of them have less travel time. To go to St. Joe's, the 4 routes are same, 9 less travel time, and 5 more travel time. So out of those 18 routes that I analyzed going to St. Joe's, the majority of them, with 13 of them, are either unchanged or have less travel time, whereas 5 have more travel time. And the ones that have more travel time were no more than 2 minutes.
Thanks, Diana. We have to wrap up. Thank you very much for your time. And Ryan. All right, Bob. Bob.
Thank you. Thank you to the council and
Yeah,
to this.
please. Let's try to be mindful of time.
How many minutes you give me, Joe?
I'll give you 8. Is that
Ooh,
all right?
That's good. Thanks. I hope I can do it. Thank you very much to the council and to the city and to all those who are here tonight. My name is Robert Haley, and I'm going to read most of this since hopefully it makes sense. Some of the points reoccur, but those are probably important points. My family and my children, which is now 3rd generation, lived in Syracuse. My parents moved out to Fayetteville. So I grew up in Fayetteville in the FM district in Manlius. Their parents grew up back in the city. This speaks to generational changes. And so many of us here in the same situation, families long time in the city, love the city and different parts of it, and family changes and want to get our kids back and live in a great place. The results of the DOT I-81 project were undertaken here will affect these 3 generations and everyone living in the Syracuse area. I believe that this is the most, as an architect and a planner, I believe this is the most critical decision we will make for the next 50 years. It will set the path and the character for Central New York for decades to come. I have been working to this end over the past 5+ years now. supporting the Moving People's Transportation Coalition, who's speaking here tonight, which is an outgrowth of the ACTS community, Alliance for Communities Transforming Syracuse, a long-term priority for them. Rethink 81, developers, planners, and architects looking at the quality of our city in terms of development. The AIA Central New York Task Force on I-81 working 5 years with the DOT. As I said, the DOT's process is in its 5th year now, and it has had about 50 community groups participating in that situation. The Save 81 group is not formally, and I may be wrong on this, so I could be corrected, formally one of those 50 groups, but the members on those groups are definitely part of some of these 50 organizations working with the DOT. Here are the current facts. The deteriorating viaduct must come down. It does not have to be rebuilt. For the first time in its history, this is true. We don't have to rebuild what we have taken down. And it gives the chance to consider, is this the best use for our city land? The land values adjacent to the current path of I-81 through the downtown area are depressed to about 11% of the typical downtown property values. That's the impact of the quality around the highway, no matter what service it's giving, the impact on the adjacent land. Our neighborhoods, family living conditions, and business successes have been negatively impacted for generations. The draft EIS can and must address these issues. There are only 2 current DOT options at this stage. The first, a new highway, wider, faster, and a faster viaduct option that is current in its current location. The second, a community grid option, diverting about 12% of the traffic of north and south traffic around to 481. And rebuilding all of the current 690 and I-81 in the city. A lot of people don't realize the part of viaduct that's considered to come down is about 10 to 15% of the total interstate highway in the city of Syracuse. So the rest of it, 690, east and south, east and west and north, is all going to be converted to faster, better highways. There is no third option yet. The DOT currently is planning a tunnel option, and we have to be presented in about 6 months. So there is no hybrid option. There was no Access Syracuse plan in the DOT. There is no option for combining the tunnel and a community grid yet. These do not exist. Both of these independent alternatives were created outside of the DOT community planning process and not based on planning criteria established over the previous 3 years of the DOT. This is about the draft EIS and how important the draft EIS is, to document it according to the federal process. The good news is that the delayed tunnel in the process has given us the time to consider and to get our groups together and really focus on all of us in the city of Central New York community, city and county. The highway through the middle of the city is not just about solving traffic problems, it is about the center of the Syracuse area and the full EIS process engaging all of the impacted areas, and we need to get this decision right. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. What's going on with other cities, interstate highways in other cities? In contrast to what's Save 81's opinion, the national trend are proving that removing highways through center of cities is working. To remove high-speed highways, limited access highways from our city centers. The urban design trends include Rochester, our neighbor here, filling in 1/3 of the current inner loop, managing the land development, offering it to the adjacent neighbors and for development, setting development guidelines, and it is underway, and their new housing, mixed-use housing, has been put into the complex, and new buildings are being developed for that entire area of the former downtown Rochester area. Milwaukee development lands, over 24 acres of $45 million being developed, 5 different projects in the land that was formerly occupied by highways. The former DOT lands are being converted to new development projects. Acres of highways land in the center of the cities are being returned to the tax base. This tax base benefits both city and county residents alike. So we need to continue to look for a new vision. What's the best use of our land use resources? Which is the positive impact on property values for generations to come? Congress of New Urbanism lists Syracuse as one of the top 10 cities with freeways without futures. This includes Denver. Dallas, Detroit, San Francisco, and the list goes on, and I'll be happy to provide it to you. Looking forward to other cities, we're not looking back to the past 100 years. The Save 81 premise, we can pick it apart, and they can pick our data apart. But we should not base looking forward on the past 100 years of transportation technology. We should not use the rearview mirror to look forward in this project. Another small fact that's in there is that the DOT, the Save 81 says a minor fact about that a tunnel would also protect public safety by ensuring emergency vehicles to get to the hospitals quickly. This is not true. The essence, and I'm going to skip ahead here to some other parts. The Save 81 documents that are being circulated in part to the Common Council and in part to the County Ledge are based on a solicited opinion of a non-participant in the DOT process. This is important. Let me say that again, and I've just said it, so I won't say it again. Both the viaduct and the tunnel are designed to carry more traffic at higher speeds. Both of these options will need to retain a limited number of exits within the city. These will continue to be relocated. These will continue to be located for even larger daily. These will continue to be locations for every day, even larger daily traffic rush hour conjunctions. Both the tunnel and the higher viaduct will concentrate and bring more traffic to about the same amount of exits we have. That problem has not been solved. You need to look at that. The community grid option is designed with multiple exits dispersed throughout the city, farther away from the city center, allowing gradual reduction in the overall amount of traffic at each exit, and thus on the single streets. The Armageddon myth is a myth. We're dispersing the traffic. That's the whole purpose of the community grid, not to concentrate at higher areas. There will be more choices for individual destinations, and less traffic jams to access these points with the highway. Again, I'm going to skip ahead here. Try and get the key points. As the original construction of I-81 through the city of Syracuse of over 50 years resulted in substantial property takings, all of the options in the DIS need to list the additional land takings. Right now, the criteria lists land takings for the tunnel and the community grid option. It has not yet looked at the tunnel option. If I said tunnel, I'm mistaken. For the viaduct and the community grid option, they list takings. And the tunnel is going to list more takings based on the fact that you cannot build on top of this particular tunnel. Syracuse is not big enough to go deep dive and come back up. It's a small city, so the geometrics of that are going to be proven out in the tunnel option coming up very quickly. But the point about is that the land takings, the community grid is the only option that has the ability to return land to the city that it took years ago. That's what's happening in other cities. This is not yet part of the draft environmental impact criteria by the DOT. It needs to be. It's fundamentally an issue. If some options take away more land from the existing right-of-way, which is very large, can't one of the options give you land back that you can then decide what to do? This is enormous for the city and the county to request on this project. In conclusion, we're down to the point where the draft EIS needs to be done carefully and completely. The groups I support have worked with the DOT now for 5.5 years over this project, the Moving People Transportation, the AIA Task Force, and the Rethink, and all supporting a comprehensive criteria. I didn't say one option, a comprehensive criteria for making this decision. This is where the city and the county together can ask the DOT to compare all of the options completely and fairly, and to have the criteria formed for the best long-term option for the health and the economic growth of the entire region. About the delay, now that it's about 2 years now, it's been ticking. Save 81 media efforts seem not to be able to live with a viaduct option. Why is there a third option by Save 81 as opposed to the viaduct option, which meets all of their primary needs? Why are they asking for a combination? I think we're concerned about that. And again, everything that Joe said and Jim and his family, we got to address complete up. They're good folks who've been in the city and they have real issues. I'm certainly not speaking against the issues there. They have continued to tell the public that there is a compromise option. That is not the case. The Access Syracuse plan and the hybrid do not exist. Be clear, the DOT has not yet completed the tunnel option for the project. We have to wait and see it and analyze it critically. There is no hybrid plan, and this is incorrect and misleading to our representatives and the people they represent. How is it the Save 81 has a list of so many of our representatives, and it's based on such an outside effort, and it's not based on verifiable fact, it's not part of the DOT process. It's unfair to the representatives, and it's also unfair to the people their constituency, which is us. The disservice of the this is a disservice to the essence of the Save 81 effort.
Bob,
the groups
wrap up.
You got it. There's this one sentence here. Thank you so much. The groups I support are eager to work with the Common Council, the mayor, and the county as well, and the mayor's office to work for the best plan for the next 50 years for the city of Syracuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. All right, we have, thank you all for sticking around. We have one last person to speak, Yusuf Abdul Qadir, and then we're going to open up to public comment.
You know, I'm the 8th child, and so 8 is my favorite number, so I will definitely keep this to 8 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Before I begin my comments, I'd like to thank the council, chairman, as well as the mayor's office for putting this discussion together. My oral presentation and discussion presented today will be submitted for the record in a few days. For those who may not know me, my name is Yusuf Abdul Qadir, and I'm a resident of the Syracuse's Southwest neighborhood, the director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is the ACLU of New York. Founded in 1951 as a New York affiliate of the ACLU, the NYCLU is a non-for-profit, nonpartisan organization with 8 chapters and regional offices across the state. We have over 160,000 members across the state, and our office in Central New York is located in Syracuse. We represent the 8 counties in Central New York, and so our perspective is regional by perspective. In fact, our office is the central region, the central voice of the NYCLU region serving Onondaga, Madison, and these other counties. And we were founded in 1963 in response, as according to our history, to the harassment and protest of residents of the 15th Ward, comprised predominantly of African American citizens who were protesting the destruction of their homes by New York State in order to continue its construction of Interstate 81 through the city of Syracuse. It is fitting, therefore, that we are here today as we discuss again what are we going to do when it comes to replacing the viaduct. When the viaduct was first built, it was said that it would be an economic engine for Syracuse, Onondaga County, and Central New York, and the region as a whole. 5 decades after our founding, we find that the viaduct has both decimated the city and left the city of Syracuse with the highest concentration of poverty amongst African Americans and Latinos, among the nation's 100 largest metropolitan areas. Onondaga County is the 9th most segregated county in the nation. Onondaga County has the highest rate of segregation within a county between school districts in all of New York State. And the city of Syracuse School District is not receiving adequate funding from New York State to provide students with a sound basic education as is required by New York State's Constitution. Any objective arbiter could see that 50+ years later, Syracuse is worse off as a result of the viaduct than it would have been otherwise. The NYCLU has been actively engaged in this struggle to replace the 81 viaduct for many years. We have seen how disparate the economic growth has been for some parts of our community, while communities of color have been rendered in highly impoverished centrist tracts, unable to have upward mobility, lacking the same economic opportunities as their white peers across the city and county. They're over-policed and in a plight that warrants immediate action. We overlook that while de jure segregation has been outlawed, Onondaga County, by maintaining I-81 as it currently is, has maintained de facto segregation in housing and in schools. Again, these are not my opinions, these are facts. From a social, economic, and environmental justice perspective, communities of color are denied equal protection of the law in almost every indicator that we know of. We are not alone in our assessments. The Atlantic magazine famously wrote an article, How to Decimate a City. Paul Jagowski of the Century Foundation wrote an article about this and did research on this. UCLA Civil Rights Project has written various reports on this issue. CNY Fair Housing and their assessment to affirm fair housing has also discussed this. The Syracuse chapter of the National Action Network, ACTS and their Moving People Coalition and Coalition, the CNY AIA, and so many others have already found similarly. In fact, even the Obama administration evidenced in their 2015 AFFH rule, and for those who don't sit around listening to this, AFFH means affirmatively furthering fair housing. A rule identified the need for identified the reality of the interrelation between infrastructure projects funded by the United States Department of Transportation, housing patterns under the auspices of housing and urban development, and how that dictates where we go to school and where we live. They sought to mitigate this reality through what's called interagency collaboration. We are proactively involved in this struggle today as we were 50 years ago because we understand the reality that I-81 as it stands serves as the proverbial whites only, as a separate but equal sign and mantra from the Jim Crow era. We know that this reality not only impacts communities of color in Syracuse. In fact, non-communities of color in Syracuse and throughout Onondaga County are also impacted. We are suffering deeply from the lack of empathy that this conversation is absent of, and what is increasingly becoming a racial caste system in Syracuse. I-81 is direct result and driver of that reality. Any decision on replacing the viaduct that doesn't center addressing this issue and these issues that I've outlined will see us 60 years from now worse off than we are today. The misinformation campaign that has been ongoing for the last several years serves not in the interests of the city of Syracuse or Onondaga County. There is nothing just about a viaduct that abuts a public housing development, forcing communities of color into multi-generational poverty. There is nothing factual about telling constituents that their commute times will be overwhelmingly increased in what's called a Carmageddon. There is nothing environmentally sound about arguing that rerouting traffic to I-481 will mean loss of natural capital. The DOT, which is the only actual independent arbiter in this, has already demonstrated that commute times would at most be 5 minutes extra as they compared to each option. You can go on their website, you can see it. That's data. We already know through DOT that if you lose an acre of land, as is a concern with rerouting to 481, you will not lose land, you will get 4 acres of additional land. So we need to stop telling people that we will lose this natural space that we have. It's not factual. For every acre of land, as I said, that would be taken up, you would be given 4 acres as mitigation, as required by the draft environmental impact statement process. Are these really considerations that should overwhelm and overcome the 5+ decades? And I'm talking about being able to get home quicker, or being able to have a larger infrastructure project, or bringing more money. And by the way, that's a misnomer. If you want to build a tunnel, there are very few organizations in Syracuse that can actually receive the federal dollars to get it. And so we're lying to our constituents and we're lying to our community when we tell them these things. Nonetheless, should these be the preceding considerations when we think about whether or not this viaduct should be replaced? Should this be the reason that we center our decision on this community? From my perspective and from the perspective of the NYCLU, racial and economic isolation of the communities of color in Syracuse should be at the center of these conversations. Not an afterthought, not a post-secondary consideration, but should be the center of these considerations. We have decimated these communities for decades. In closing, I urge for a more sound and reasoned conversation. We have the opportunity to make Syracuse, Onondaga County, and Central New York rebound in ways that we never have before. The viaduct replacement doesn't only just benefit the city of Syracuse, it also makes the county and region a more just and desirable place to live. From the civil liberties and civil rights perspective, it is clear that we must do more to mitigate the aforementioned issues of segregation, inequitable school funding, concentrated poverty, economic disparities. I thank you for your consideration of my comments and yield for questions as appropriate. Thank you.
Eight minutes on the note. Eight minutes exactly. Thank you, Mr. Abdul Qadir. The alarm went off right as you started clapping. It was. I know you prophesied it like Babe Ruth, telling me it would be exactly 8 minutes, and therefore it was. Let it be so. Okay, so we've broken these comments up, the comment section. I'm sorry we ran over. We ran over by about 15, 20 minutes from the 40 we shot for. But I plan to give some time for public comment and public input. So we've divided these up into different stances on the replacement for 81. So as long as we have time, I think we'll have about 40, 45 minutes for the public comment section. And I'll try to go in order, the way people came in, but mixing up the opinions that we hear from all parties represented, that we hear from some Save 81, we hear from some tunnel people, and we hear from some grid people in the discussion of public comment to follow. So I guess to start off, everyone will have 2 minutes to present. Mike Bugwin from Jamesville, would you like to speak first?
Good evening. It's Bergwin, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Couldn't read that.
All right. Let's get rid of 690. After all, blaming 81 Syracuse's economic problems due to its dividing and splitting or segregating the city, it's patently absurd to think that that is what's causing the problems Syracuse has. All right. You know, if 81 is the problem, 81 South is, then why don't we get rid of 81 North? Why don't we get rid of 690 East and West? They divide the city also, don't they? Now, when the street level grid option was looking unpopular, it was changed to community grid option, a more politically correct designation, and yet a majority of Central New York still does not want whatever it's called if it limits current access to the city. And we've heard a lot of data about commute times. I use 481 to go into the east side of the city, and I use 81 to come into the heart of the city and to the west and north of the city. And I don't care what times they're talking about. I know it's at least a 10-minute more drive. The delays created for the emergency vehicles can be mitigated, but what about the rest of us? You know, we're going to be stuck with the red lights and the stop signs. The street level grid is being railroaded by those who feel, in retrospect, mind you, that 81 created a perceived wrong or detriment to the city. You know, there's a lot of arguments that it helped the city. And it's just to fulfill their own agendas. I can understand this walkability stuff, but you got to remember, this city is buried in snow for 4 months. This city, and then it rains probably another 2 months of the year. And nobody's going to be walking in the snow and in the rain. And, you know, to ignore that fact, it's just, you know, just wrong-headed. And what it does, it neglects the southern suburbs. Now, I submitted a scaled-down footprint of 81, which addresses all the problems. The Adams Street exit and entrance, the Harrison Street exit, and the connections between 690 and 81, while maintaining one northbound route and 2 southbound lanes. Something for everyone. I've spoken to Mr. Frechette. I've mailed Commissioner Driscoll, because he was DOT commissioner for a while, and several other principals involved, and I received no feedback from anyone except to say all options will be considered. You know, and that's not good enough. And ramming the street grid down our throats isn't good enough either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bugwin. How do I pronounce it? Barwin? Thank you. All right, Laura McCord.
Hi, my name's Laura McCord, and I live in Syracuse. I'm not from here originally. I lived in Georgia for most of my life and moved up here for work, and I've really fallen in love with the city. And I have a confession. When I first heard of the need for a change in 81, I was afraid. I was afraid of change. Like so many people, I was so afraid of change. What does this mean? But being a nerd, I sought information, and what I found was, like what many people have said, is that around the world and around our country, we have people who are benefiting from a community grid option who took the stand to remove the highway and have seen prosperity and have seen thriving. And that's what I want for this city. Like, I know I haven't been here for very long, and the advertisements that I've seen from Save 81, they scare me. They're pretty doomsday, and their graphics are pretty terrifying. But in looking at all the facts that are out there and all the people that time and time again have proven that we can not only survive, but we can all thrive with a community grid. I've just been inspired by the people who've come forward and talked today, and so that's what I want to leave with. So,
thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. Rob Romeo, would you like to speak? Yes, please. And if anyone would like to present their paperwork, yeah, we'll get them all. And we'd also like to say that we will try to post either to the city's website or the Facebook event any statements or information that's been presented today.
Good evening, Councilor.
Good evening,
Councilor Driscoll. Thank you so much for this forum. I think this is what's sorely needed. Brings people together, and your task force or your committee is here a couple hours already, or almost going on a couple hours. Microphone, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to thank the committee for the opportunity. And you know, I'm just a concerned citizen. I have a business or property owner downtown. I've been in the city my whole life. I've been watching what's happening with the I-81 project. And you know, I just want to make sure that, you know, we as a community come together and look at ways to find the positive and the common ground to come up with the right solution. I think that, as some of the speakers said, all the facts aren't in yet. All of the alternatives have not been addressed and looked at and studied. I think we have to rely on our professionals at the state level to gather that information and make sure that all of the alternatives get their fair hearing and get the correct information and the input from the community. I think that's the most important thing that we can do right now as a community. But there's one other thing, and I think that I don't know that it's really been discussed or really been, you know, addressed here, but looking around the country, other projects, other cities, how it works, this is a federal interstate highway. This is a federal project. Somebody mentioned that it's 85% paid for by the federal government. You know, I don't know if that's 85% is correct or if it's 90% or 95%. Maybe the other 10% is the state. I think the state's going to pay for their 10% or the other 15%, whatever it may be. But we ought to know for sure, and the misinformation or the information should be out there, that the citizens of Syracuse, what are they paying for and what are they not paying for here? And I don't think they're paying for much at all. I think that the matter is, this is a federal project. You know, and if at anything, maybe a small component of the state. Now, the state just spent $6 billion rebuilding the Tappan Zee Bridge, now the Mario Cuomo Bridge. $6 billion. Someone mentioned couple $100 million this thing is going to cost. When you start talking about billions of dollars, it's a whole new universe. And that's a whole new opportunity for our community. And you know, Buffalo got $1 billion from the state of New York to help with their economic development. When you start talking about $1 billion, this is a once-in-a-lifetime huge opportunity for our community, and I believe it's 90% or more coming from the federal government, which we've been all spending federal dollars to go to Alabama and Louisiana and everywhere else. What's come back to Syracuse? So the important players in this issue, and what the other thing that we can do right now, besides getting the information so that it can be analyzed for which result is going to come about, is to go after the money. And we have a congressman and we have 2 U.S. senators that are in very powerful positions, and we got to make sure that they get the maximum amount of money. I think this gentleman said that, you know, if the money rained out of the sky, I would consider the tunnel as well as the community grid. And I think that's an important consideration because we have some rainmakers in Washington and they better make it rain. When you talk about $1 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion, if it's coming from the federal government, we need to get that money. We need to maximize the dollars into this project. That's what our focus should be. That's what our local elected officials should be doing with our federal elected officials, maximizing the dollars. Sherry Owen said, you know, very well that she's a member of this community, and her community is Syracuse and it's Central New York. It's also New York State, and she's also an American, and so are all of us. We're Syracusans, and it's the time that Syracuse goes to the federal government and gets the maximum amount of money for this project for the future of our community.
Thank you, Mr. Romeo. Tom Kinslow. And if I could, just one point of clarification, distinction that's important with the Tappan Zee Bridge is a lot of the New York City infrastructure is revenue generating, which makes a very large difference in receiving federal funding.
Right. Thank you for having us.
Traditionally, I don't think we'll have a pay fee on the section of 81. So it's
right. Just checking. You can hear me?
Go ahead.
Yep. I'm an architect and planner, and I've worked in San Francisco prior to the earthquake taking down the Embarcadero. And then I went out and I worked in Boston when they buried Route 93 right in front of our office. And I know that both things were extreme changes when they happened. But the good news, and most of my points were made by prior speakers, so I'll be brief. The thing that happened in San Francisco when they brought the highway down was real estate values lifted by 300%. Housing went up 51%. Jobs went up by 23% in that zone. It was so good that the opposition even forgot why they were opposing it, and the city has just embraced it. So they've had a great time with it. Milwaukee did similar things, and Rochester, just down the road, has got its inner loop going as well. But investment happens when the tires hit the ground. When the commerce comes down to the ground, it helps the city the most. When it's up in the air, it can't help the city. When it's below, it can't help the city. You need those tires on the ground to get the commerce, all the commerce that you can get. And that's what drives the values up, the real estate values up. And that's one of the reasons why I support the community grid, is because I see the potential. I've seen the potential in these other cities just rocket right through the roof. And you bring, when you've got the eds and meds, which is 65% of our employers in this zone, and you've got the downtown in this area, meeting together in an enterprise zone in the middle, and you clear that out, the potential's incredible, absolutely incredible. So I would support the community grid just because I think that it's a really good thing for Syracuse.
Thank you very much for your input. All right, Joe, I hope I get this right, Tedisco?
Barry. My name is Joe Tedesco, and I am the owner of the Miss Syracuse Diner, 30 feet outside the Montgomery Street side of City Hall. I'm a retired corporate credit manager, International Credit, who retired 8 years ago to open a diner. And I am a local guy who every day see travelers from either north to south or south to north that Google a diner full service in downtown Syracuse that come here. I'm one of the few people who have spoken so far tonight, with the exception of the Brights perhaps, that turns a key every morning to make an income. I ask, when I have the opportunity, those visitors at the diner, if you have the opportunity to travel through downtown city streets to get to the diner, or continue in a loop around downtown, I have this, and it's not in writing, trust me, 0 say they will navigate a city street unfamiliar to them. However, there are near options for them in exiting that allow them to come here. No one has responded positively about navigating a city street or an equally difficult community grid. There are countless pieces of property available for development within downtown Syracuse already and outside the footprint of Route 81, so the discussion that massive development would replace the elevated portion is nonsense. In the event Route 81 is in fact torn down, and we do have this community grid, as a minority of people espouse, I cannot see any reason why the diner has to remain open because of the amount of business we get from people traveling north to south. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tedisco. Appreciate it. All right, next speaker is Bob Doucette. You're going to yield? Okay, he's going to yield this time. Ooh, the alarm's going off for him. Damian Vlatowski. Is that correct? Ulatowski, I'm sorry. That was the Swiss pronunciation.
I'd like to thank the members of the council first. My name's Damian Ulatowski. I'm the supervisor for the town of Clay. It's home to 60,000 people, and if you look at that as compared to the size of Syracuse, it's a pretty good size community. But if I couple it with the town of Cicero, the town of Salina, and the town of DeWitt, we have a substantial population. All of us are concerned about what a community grid would do to our communities individually. But that's not exactly why I'm here. I'm here to tell you some other things that I think are important. If an infrastructure impediment that went through the city of Syracuse created a community divide, then I say take it down. But when we have the chance to take it down, let's not look at it parochially. It's not just Syracuse. It's all of Onondaga County and beyond whose concerns need to be heard. That's why I mentioned Cicero, Clay, DeWitt, and Salina as well. Because there are community needs that we have as well that I think will be lost. Just like what was claimed 50 years ago when the viaduct was first put up, that it displaced things. We don't want to displace things in those communities either. This is a chance for us to be inclusive, for each and every one of us to have a voice here that puts forth an alternative that can support not only the city of Syracuse, but the community and all the residents who traverse that. So I think what we need to do is look at what I guess is being called a hybrid option. I think we could bring that viaduct to street level, but let's do it over a tunnel, because there are those people who want to rapidly go through the city of Syracuse because they're on a mission to deliver goods and services or to see their loved ones someplace else, and they don't have time or the inclination to stop in Syracuse. But that said, let's recognize those that do embrace the city of Syracuse or need it for their livelihoods and give them the grid that falls on top of that tunnel option. So let's be inclusive. Let's look at this intelligently between now and the end of the year. And I agree with you. Let's not fight about it. Let's sit down, engage each other, and come up with an alternative that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ulatowski. That was very well said. How about Gene Tonelli? I think we're going to get through everybody, so that's exciting for me.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. You're setting your timer, right? So I don't have to set Siri for mine?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a 58-year resident of Syracuse, and I've got a proposal that I can't get much traction for, but it doesn't involve the other ones. It involves a community grid, a fast track of I-81 through Syracuse, and eliminating a disaster waiting to happen. If you look south in the south end side of Syracuse, you'll see the CSX railroad tracks coming up. When they hit 481, they turn west till they hit I-81, then parallel I-81 to about the level of the dome, turn west again under I-81, going back of Armory Square, then go through a rather commercialized area, Erie Boulevard West, West Fayette Street, and intersect with the main trunk line. Now, if we were to somehow get a hold of the right-of-way of the CSX railroad tracks, we could build a fast I-81 right through the west side of Syracuse that could connect 690 up around the Hiawatha Boulevard area, which will make it a four-way intersection, which we don't have now. It would eliminate the viaduct, because we could have a community grid dumping off before where the Adams Street exit is now. The danger waiting to happen is that trains, CSX trains, pass through the city all the time. They are full of explosive, volatile, toxic compounds, including Bracken crude. They have destroyed towns around Canada and the United States, worst one being in Quebec, where it took out the whole center of a town, killing almost 50 people. This is the accident waiting to happen, and it goes right through the middle of our city. If we could get this right of way, we could build an I-81 on the west side and have a community grid. Now, what is in it for CSX? If we were to build, when the railroad tracks hit 481, if they would parallel I-481 north, they could hit the main trunk line right around Lynn Court, which is where the main railroad trunk line is, bypassing I-81 and everything else. This would allow freight to get through from the south of Syracuse on their lines, fairly minimal disruption, and provide a way to get kind of everything we want if the engineering can make it work. But this is an idea which gives you the grid, gives you a fast I-81 track, gives you an intersection at 690 which goes from three-way to four-way. And this, I'm just waiting sadly for one of the tank cars to go. About 5 years ago, a propane tanker fell off the tracks right about the level of the dome. It didn't detonate, which was nice because there are other propane tankers in that train. So just an idea to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Telly. I appreciate it. I don't want to butcher this name. Frank Usiatinsky? Hey, good job. I got there? Holy moly. Great. I haven't started your 2 minutes yet. I'm waiting for you to get set up. Yeah, and if you could just hit the mic, make sure that because we have people watching at home too who won't be able to hear. We do stream the meetings here.
Hi, thank you.
You can put this in the back afterwards if everyone else would like to see it.
Okay. My journey started 2 years ago, going to the town meetings and expecting some real rethinking of the viaduct.
Just say your name and where you
I'm Frank Usiatinsky, Fayetteville, New York. What I wanted to ask, why I'm here is because I think what we need is the DOT to actually design a viaduct option. We all know what they've shown, and I think it's been proven tonight. Everybody refers to what exists today. So what my point is, nobody's redesigned the viaduct. We have a re-engineered same thing that we have already. I took 15 minutes online to look at what people do for the complex urban crossings through Syracuse. My first number one thing, because I've lived here my whole life, is get rid of Harrison and Adams. Let's reuse the community grid option, exit on-ramps, okay, if we truly want to improve those spaces between the hospital district and downtown. So that's number one. Number two, why can't it be something amazing? Why does it have to be the same thing? This bridge viaduct, there's many amazing solutions that have not been looked into because the DOT had a predetermined position on doing the community grid, right? It is clear, right, from their presentations that the desire was never to rebuild it. So I just want, that's why I'm here to make those two simple points to you, because I love Syracuse, right? I've seen it, we've seen it alive, I've seen it die, and I've seen the rebirth of it. And clearly I-81 is not the issue of why we are revitalizing today and the way things move. So I think it can be something amazing, and I think we need to have the DOT, I hope anyone here who has any voice to resubmit what we can build here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, so thanks everybody for coming. We got 2 or 3 more, or 4 more people, so roughly about 10 more minutes of presentations, comments from the public. Andrew Schuster.
How are you doing? I'm Andrew Schuster of 203 Wellesley Road, Syracuse, New York. I'm a partner at Ashley McGraw Architects. I employ 45 professionals here in downtown Syracuse. So I am also a business owner. And my biggest issue as a business owner in Syracuse is attracting talent, because I compete for educated, talented people with big cities throughout the country. And so what's important for me is that the city of Syracuse, especially the urban core, is thriving, because that's what I use to sell people on relocating here. Most of my employees relocate. I don't have a big pool of people that I can hire from locally. So I really favor the community grid, because I would like to see us as a city able to expand, able to grow, able to develop its own business identity and its own urban identity away from just a highway that people really don't want to go near. You can walk under it. It's terrible. So the other thing is that if we replace this with a highway, it's a backwards looking decision. Car ownership's declining. It's been declining for a decade. Self-driving cars are here, and they're going to be on the roads. I don't know what that means, but it means that traffic's going to change drastically in the next 10 years. So why would we build a highway that's going to deal with yesterday's traffic when we don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years? Everything's changing. I've built buildings along the viaduct corridor. The soils there are terrible. I don't know how you even support a tunnel. I don't know how you keep it from sinking into the ground. I mean, it's just soup. And let's not be so afraid to lose something we have that we can't build towards a future that will be better for all of us. So my last parting thought is just anyone who drives 81 to get places, you've driven through Binghamton. How long have they been building that viaduct in Binghamton? If businesses are truly reliant on 81 being in exactly that spot, they're not going to survive a project that long.
Thank you for your input, sir. Next speaker is Mr. Charles Pearsall.
Good evening, Council President and the Council. I come here because I'm a native Syracusan, and I saw this highway from the beginning being built in 1956-54 when I lived out in Liverpool. But where the highway is right now, over on Adams Street and Adams and Harrison Street area, I don't know if everybody knows, but for over 40 years, about 50 years, it's been the highest concentration of asthma and bronchitis over there in that area. And those are my people, the African Americans in the city of Syracuse. It destroyed our community. And you know, my concerns now with the Common Council is whatever happens, I need you guys to promise that we'll have some jobs for these young brothers in that community, because a lot of them are uneducated, but a lot of them are educated, but they don't have the skills. So I hope you set up a program, or apprentice program, where they can come in, get their education, also earn a skill before they can get these jobs, because jobs are very important. And if whatever comes in that area, I walk the area. I'm 72 years old, and I walk 4 or 5 miles every day. In my community, I also drive. But in that area, I can go anywhere in this city in 2 hours and 3 hours and a half by walking back and forth. So with that, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that it's very important that the African Americans that's been hurting for all those 50 years, some type of opportunity for jobs in the future be available for those people to get those jobs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pearsall. Thank you, Mr. Pearsall. I appreciate that. To address your concerns, I know the administration is working on the Syracuse Build program, so you might want to talk to maybe Greg or someone from the administration afterwards and get some information. And you don't look like you're 72 years old, so God bless you. Keep walking around. Keep walking. Is that the secret? Is that what I have to do? Okay. Is it Mike Leone or Mike Leone? Which one? Leone. Mike Leone.
Can I address the room, or do I have to talk?
Sure, you can do whatever you want. I'm very lax on the rules, as you can tell with my bad timekeeping.
More of an impassioned plea than anything else. So, I live in Syracuse. I bought a building here, a small building, but I love the city dramatically. And I think of what we're talking about with this project, I see a lot of destruction. And this gentleman here talking about the bridges, why are people living in downtown? They're living in downtown because there's places of historic significance that have character and architectural quality to them. I don't really see that in the suburbs. If I did, I probably would have bought a building there. but I chose to live here. When you look at historic pictures of Syracuse, you see beautiful architecture, you see people living in the streets, you see community. You don't get that with a viaduct. Go underneath the viaduct now. What do you see? We saw the pictures of it. There's going to be more enough work for you guys if we build buildings in those neighborhoods that are vacant right now. You guys want to work in road work? I think you'd rather work in a building, a nice high-rise, right? Indoors. People like working inside, but we also like walking outside too, even if it is raining or snowing out. That's why we live in Syracuse. So I just want to make an impassioned plea to my suburbanite neighbors. Please, don't advocate for destruction. We did it once 50 years ago. We did it all over the state. Urban renewal was a terrible policy. Let's not double down on a bad idea. Keep the momentum going in the city and be what it has to be. It's a beautiful place to live. But please, don't allow cars to trump people. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Thank you. Okay, our final speaker, I believe. Yes. Make sure. Oh no, there was some more underneath I missed. But no, we'll just call it.
No, it's okay if there's more, but.
Missy Ross.
I am a resident of the south side of Syracuse, a homeowner and a taxpayer, and I am a mother. And my situation, the reason I want the community grid is because if you rebuild that viaduct, it's not up to federal highway standards. They have to expand it and take out more tax-paying land. We already can't fund our school district, and people are fleeing the city of Syracuse because of it. You don't want to help us and negotiate as far as the suburbs, as far as integrating the schools, doing anything, voting for our foundation aid. I don't think it's fair for you to ask me to give up more of my land and tax revenue that's going to come right off the backs of my daughter right there. I don't think that's fair for you to save 2 to 3 minutes. I'm sorry. It's not okay.
Mr. Ross. All right, Jeffrey Murray. Sorry, Jeff. There was 3 of the little cards that slipped behind, so I'm sorry. I gave everyone false hope that it was going to end. I hope you don't want it to end. I really love community talk. I think I could sit here for another 2-3 hours, but I know my fellow counselors don't feel the same.
I can see that in your face.
We only got 10 more minutes. I'll let it go. I'm not going to push it. But Mr. Murray, sorry, go ahead.
My name is Jeff Murray, and I'm the lead representative from Carpenter's Local 277, Central New York. We have over 2,600 members in Syracuse, in the community. I want to talk about what a bunch of gentlemen here spoke. There's 2 new bridges on the north side going over 81. They are beautiful. They are architectural bridges, architectural concrete. It is a real thing. New bridges, higher, beautiful concrete bridges, not rusty old bridges like they're talking about. Beautiful walkways underneath. It can be a reality. Earlier, Mr. Romeo spoke about billions of dollars coming into this community if the bridges are replaced. Okay? Federal money coming in. Now, we talk about jobs. We talk about the local community. Right now, we have Syracuse City School District projects going on. We have already taken over a dozen inner city young men and women into our apprenticeship program, and the work hasn't even started yet. We are going to be taking lots more and giving them careers, good paying careers with these jobs. You build that highway, we will take hundreds of people. Earlier someone said, well, there'll be people from out of town building this. I can tell you, looking around this room, these are the people that are going to be building these bridges. And they live here, and they will return their money to this community. It is a win-win situation. The bridges should be rebuilt. They should be beautiful. They should be a part of this city. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Okay, just a few more. Corin Claver.
I think, oh, she here.
Nope.
I'm afraid we're on the brink of having a hollow city. If we continue to invest in infrastructure that routes traffic to the suburbs, instead of a community grid option that will open up a land bank, open up the tax base for school, that will fund our schools, as Missy Ross said, we're going to have a hollow city. Not only are we not going to have this, because there's going to be no one is going to live in the city because there's going to be no decent funding for the schools. So everybody is going to continue to move out to the suburbs. That's been happening for the last 50 years, thanks to redlining and housing covenants, et cetera, et cetera. But we can reverse that because people want to live in the city. But guess what? There aren't decent schools in the city, or there are struggling schools in the city that need more funding. This is a way to give those schools better funding. Building and trades, guess what? All those buildings that are going to be built, all that land, that's long-term, that's construction happening right there. I don't see why those building and trades can't be building buildings right there. It seems to me that's another use for housing and office space, for construction space. The future of the cities. When I moved to this city 20 years ago, I wanted to walk downtown, and people were like, wait, you can't walk downtown from SU on my job visit. I mean, and then I hit the highway and I was like, wow, this is weird. I mean, yeah, of course you can build a bigger viaduct. You can build a higher viaduct, but we don't need it. We're a tiny city. The studies show that we don't need it. And finally, for a moral reason, we have one of the fifth most highly segregated counties in the nation, the state, which
nation.
Is it? The nation?
Yes.
Come on, folks. We can do better.
Thank you, Ms. Claver. Stephen Irwin.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm the Regional Vice Chairman of the Trucking Association of New York. America's interstate highways are the most crucial piece of infrastructure for the country's economy. They're the workplace of the trucking industry, which nearly 90% of all New York communities rely upon to deliver their goods. Here in central New York, you don't have to look further than the New York State Thruway or Interstate 81 to see that. Given this, I believe it's crucial that the voice of the trucking industry is heard as this debate over what to do with the aging section of I-81 through downtown Syracuse rages on. For our industry, the choice is obvious. The safest place for trucks is on the interstate. It's unfathomable to demolish this critical transportation artery in favor of sending large trucks into a jammed community grid or along a route that wastes time, especially with the implementation this year of electronic logs. We must maintain I-81's current route for the sake of our industry and the central New York economy. Everyone knows that the trucking industry is responsible for delivering all the goods we need to survive, from food for grocery stores, restaurants, hospitals, and other institutions to the fuel to heat these places and run our cars as well. But few people realize what trucking means to the local economies. The trucking industry pays the majority of the road tax that helps to maintain the highways. Of course, there's more to this problem than the economic impact. The community grid presents a myriad of issues for the trucking industry and potentially for other drivers sharing the road with trucks. Our members adhere to the strictest safety standards, but city streets simply are not easy to navigate for large trucks. Forcing trucks to travel down a 1.5 mile strip of heavy traffic with drivers who may not be accustomed to sharing local roadways with trucks could create unsafe conditions. There's also some other issues. The town of Van Buren and the town of Camillus have some of the largest local food providers. There's also Ted Park, which is a fuel hub. And for the trucks coming up 81 to have to now go 481 and 690, 690 is already an extremely busy highway. We're just overcrowding an additional highway. So there's a lot of things that have to be looked at. I think everybody here tonight's had good points, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. We appreciate it. All right, apologies again for the false alarm. This is really the last one this time. Andra Limanis, I'm sorry I've dropped the 4 cards. Trying to keep my act together up here.
Oh my God, the pressure. My name is Andra Limanis, and I live in Syracuse. I'm a transplant. I used to live in the hills south of Syracuse in Lafayette. And I would always prefer to take the country roads into town because of black ice on the elevated highways. You know, once you slip on that, you never go back. I also moved my family into Syracuse because we wanted to be able to walk everywhere. We wanted to know our neighbors. We wanted to encounter people. And now I'm doing that a lot more often because I have a really old car. So when I took it to the shop today on the west side, I walked back to my university area house, and I had the best day. You know, it was very healthy. So I think, you know, community grid, get tires on the ground, get feet on the ground, and get people into the shops and talking to each other. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I was shooting for about an hour 20, an hour and a half. We ended up just short of 2 hours, so I didn't do horribly with the timing. Madam President agrees. Can we put that in the record? Disagrees with me that I did a good job. So if we can put that on the official roll. Thank you, everyone, for coming here and speaking. Thanks for everyone who presented information and spoke. And I appreciate all your input. Have a good one. You can all check all the information up on the city's website. We'll try to post as much of the information we received as possible.